The Ukrainian Defense Forces very effectively fired the HIMARS rocket system at Russian territory on July the 26th. A military facility of Russia came under attack. The incident was reported by the Russian telegram channel ASH, which covers events in the Belgorod region. On the day of the attack, the channel reported the arrival of 4 HIMARS missiles at the military location in Razumnoy 71 microdistrict. Neither the authorities nor the official Russian media reported this, hiding the consequences of the strike, and the consequences are significant. On August the 3rd, Pepel reported heavy losses of the Russian armed forces in this attack. Around 15 servicemen were killed when a HIMARS struck a Russian military transshipment base near the village of Belovskoy in the Belgorod region. The Russian resource wrote, "It is noted that the missiles hit the exact location of the accumulation of personnel and equipment. The source emphasizes that the base was used as a transit point through which the movement of troops and resources took place. Now the base has been relocated to another location." Recall, HIMARS are High Mobility Artillery Rocket Systems, is an American high-mobility artillery rocket system capable of delivering precision strikes at a distance of up to 80 kilometers in a standard configuration and more using long-range missiles. Ukraine began using these systems in the summer of 2022 after receiving supplies from the United States. HIMARS has become one of the most effective weapons, allowing the Ukrainian Armed Forces to accurately hit ammunition depots, headquarters, logistics hubs, and important enemy targets. Earlier, media reported that there were 8 arrivals in Donetsk at the base of Putin's army on July the 25th. Z channels write about HIMARS. Expert Petr Andriushchenko reported on his social media page about 8 hits on the enemy army in occupied Donetsk. Ukrainian journalist Andrei Saplienko is also sure that one of the strikes occurred at the Zasyadko mine, where Putin's troops were based. Z channels wrote that the strikes were carried out using 8 HIMARS MLRS rockets. More detailed information is still unavailable, as are comments from the occupation authorities. Russian propaganda has targeted Azerbaijan, turning the country into its enemy. Kremlin-controlled media resort to offensive analogies against Baku, and Moscow is losing another ally, writes Agentstvo. In a recent article, the Moskovsky Komsomolets newspaper compares the actions of the Azerbaijani authorities with the policies of Nazi Germany. The reason was the dismantling of a monument to the artist Ivan Aivazovsky in Khankendi, which the author of the article interpreted as an act of racial cleansing, similar to how the Nazis destroyed monuments and books of Jewish scientists in the 1930s. It is noteworthy that before the start of the war with Ukraine back in 2014, the Kremlin similarly compared Ukrainians to fascists. According to the newspaper, the decisive factor for the demolition was Aivazovsky's Armenian roots and therefore unwanted blood. In its article, it directly drew a historical parallel between Azerbaijan's actions and the Nazi regime, comparing Baku to the Third Reich. This is the first time that Russian state media has so openly insulted Azerbaijan. The author mentions that in Germany, under the Nazis, Heinrich Heinz's books were burned because of his Jewish origin, and in Kiev, during the Euromaidan in December 2013, a monument to Lenin was torn down. Relations between Baku and Moscow worsened after a security forces raid in Yekaterinburg, during which Azerbaijani nationals were killed. Azerbaijani forensic experts concluded that the men had been beaten and tortured. Official Baku has been using harsh rhetoric against Russia for several months. After the scandal with the same Stepanakert, the Azerbaijani Foreign Ministry accused TASS of violating territorial integrity and promised to respond in kind, right down to using the historical names of Russian cities. The Russian agency was forced to rewrite the article twice. Meanwhile, Sputnik Azerbaijan employees and Russians linked to cybercrime and drug trafficking were detained in Baku. In response, representatives of the Azerbaijani diaspora were arrested in Moscow. Tensions are rapidly growing. The situation shows that Russia, weakened by the war with Ukraine, is no longer able to contain multi-vector conflicts. Its resources are scattered, and the information war is turning against it. Observers emphasize that Azerbaijan is openly challenging Moscow and is not afraid, and this is especially humiliating for the Kremlin, which until recently considered Baku a reliable partner and even a satellite. Now even former allies are attacking on all fronts, informationally, diplomatically, and politically.
Russia is massively confiscating apartments from former residents in the occupied territories and handing them over to Russians, while Kremlin-linked construction companies are profiting from the reconstruction of housing destroyed by the Russian invasion, writes the Wall Street Journal. In the occupied territory, the Russian-backed authorities have declared thousands of apartments abandoned, as a result of which the Ukrainians who fled faced obstacles in returning, confirming their ownership or receiving compensation. At the same time, those who arrived from Russia enjoy a number of benefits, such as a 2% mortgage rate on new homes, the publication writes. The article notes that the strategy of replacing people who once lived in captured territories with ethnic Russians is a strategy that Moscow has implemented many times, and captured Mariupol was no exception. Mass displacement and destruction opened up the real estate market. While workers cleared the rubble, realtors bought up properties from fleeing residents on the cheap. One of the new arrivals, a Russian woman from Siberia, said she had bought an apartment in the city that only needed minor repairs and intended to spend her retirement there, fulfilling her husband's dream of living by the sea. For now, she said she would rent it to a tenant, a Muscovite who now lives and works in Mariupol. Alexander Nosachenko, a former resident of Mariupol, said that a Russian soldier had occupied his seaside dacha on the outskirts of the city. Being of draft age, Nosachenko could not return to Mariupol himself to receive compensation, and his wife, who had survived the Russian blockade of the city, refused on principle to return there. The house with a clock, once a monument to Mariupol's unique heritage, now serves as a monument to Russia's transformation of the city. In the general plan for the reconstruction of Mariupol, the house with a clock was marked for restoration. However, in 2022, the house was demolished to make way for a building with a completely different layout. However, the former residents expected to be able to get apartments in the new building. The 2022 decree gave them the right to resettlement to the site of the old building. However, after construction began, they were informed that the law had changed. Residents no longer have the right to resettlement to the site of their old houses, but have the right to resettlement anywhere in the city. Mariupol resident Elena Pudak told the Wall Street Journal that her mother was trying to return to the city to get compensation for her apartment in the clock house. She was denied entry at Russia's Sheremetyevo airport without explanation, but Pudak suspects that authorities are trying to keep out people with property claims.